Hello, everyone. My name is Gretchen Rowe, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome two of my esteemed colleagues today to have a conversation about a game-changing opportunity for you as we roll into the holidays. I'm still a little breathless that it is November, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to do some assessment with your students, particularly if math is a struggle in your household, and talk about how we might be able to make that easier for you. A lot of you found this topic really interesting. And really what we're going to talk about is our two interventions, aim for addition and subtraction and aim for multiplication. By way of introduction, I am the homeschooling mom of 6. My very last one is a senior in high school, and he's out the door in May, and looking forward to that, much more so than his mother is. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to host these two lovely ladies today. So Sue, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sue Wachter, and I have been with the company like forever. It's like my second home here. So I love working with the customers. I particularly love the whole filling in the gap and the families where you feel like your student is behind or getting behind. That is my most favorite conversation with customers. So I'm excited about today and about sharing this great intervention product.
I'm Amanda Capps. I am in customer service at Demme Learning, and I have been with Demme Learning for the last 13 years. I am a homeschool mom of 8, and I am a second generation homeschooler. So that makes it a little bit unique. I have worked remotely for Demme Learning the entire time I have worked for them out of Northwest Arkansas. And yeah, it has been a crazy ride. Typically, I'm supporting customers, and this topic comes up all the time in customer service. How important are facts? How do we address a fact deficit? So I think this is a very appropriate topic for this time of year, because a lot of times we're doing some evaluation and we're saying, okay, something's missing. There are some gaps here. What can we do to fix it while we have a little bit of a break and before we pick things back up in the second semester? So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you that it has been a privilege to watch this product evolve, to watch how it has changed the lives of so many students. And so often as parents, we think that our kids are struggling and they're just not math oriented, or math is not their favorite subject. And often, I don't know about you, but I don't like doing things I'm not good at. And so that makes a huge difference for kids. Often when we have this conversation, parents don't realize the burden of counting on successful math instruction. But Sue, you said that often you'll talk with parents and they'll say, well, I'm an adult and I count. So can you talk a little bit about, yes, that may be true, but yes, and I guess I should say.
Yes, and some of you will say, I count and I went through calculus. And that's awesome that you were able to do that. But so many students that we talk to aren't able to even get through long division because of the counting. So yes, I'm not saying it's not possible to go to higher level math with not having your facts fluent, but I've just seen so much evidence that it makes a total difference to the student once they have those facts. It's just a total game changer for many students.
Amanda, I know that you often say to parents that we want something different for our children. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I was one of those kids actually coming into the Math UC program many years ago that was having that very issue. My mom was not a confident math instructor. We curriculum hopped quite a bit trying to find, that magical unicorn that was just going to make me love math. And the reality is that didn't really exist. But what did happen was because of transitioning into Math UC and having younger siblings that were starting at the beginning of the program. My parents made an incredibly hard decision because I was in 6th grade at the time, and they took me back to the beginning because we didn't have anything like the aim for addition and subtraction or the aim for multiplication at that time. And that was kind of the only solution if you wanted to address gaps in your students' foundation. But it made all the difference in my math journey. I went from being an incredibly math just produced major anxiety in me. My brain would just shut down. I remember feeling like a deer in the headlights, the majority of the time when it came to math concepts. And Math UC completely changed that for me because of the visual and hands-on nature, which is the way I needed to learn math and be able to really connect with it concretely.
Absolutely. And I like the way that you said that. Yeah, it doesn't mean you are going to develop a phenomenal love of math. I still think it's spelled with 4 letters for a reason. But Math UC was the secret for me to be able to teach my children. Because of the structure of the program, it really does make it possible for the non-confident math parent to feel like they're being successful. So we came up with a whole list of reasons why kids may struggle, or what the characteristics are that indicate struggle. And I know you know this like the back of your hand because you have these conversations every day, but can you talk about the silly mistakes and the procrastination and the long time to do math a little bit?
So a lot of times when we're giving the student the math page, we're thinking they just need to get it done and we can go on with our day. And it's so important to realize, especially when a student does not have mastery and does not have understanding, that their attention span is only so long. So we always say around here, it's their age +2. If they do not know how to do something, that's how many minutes you have to work on that. And so a lot of times, and I was, trust me, I was that mom too. It's like, come on, get your work done. Come on, get it done. Quit goofing around, all that. But neurologically, I didn't know that they couldn't. They couldn't because they were past that shutdown phase in their math work, and they needed to get a break from it, or they didn't quite have all the pieces. Because with math, that's why Math UC is sequential, because you have to have certain tools to be able to function in problems. And so the number one tool is addition and subtraction and your multiplication facts. And so students typically from 8 to 16 can be struggling just due to this single issue, is the math facts.
And so sometimes as parents, we observe externally because we don't know what's happening internally. And sometimes we'll think, why are you procrastinating? Or you're just making silly mistakes. But the truth is, sometimes those silly mistakes are the fact that your student is literally either visibly or in their head counting. And if they make a mistake in their counting, for instance, if they're doing a 3-digit plus a 3-digit addition problem that involves carrying, think about all the functional pieces that have to occur with that. And it's really easy for them to get sidetracked. So what may look like procrastination to you, or fiddling around, as one of my good homeschool friends would say, she'd say, you're fiddling around, get to your math. That could be that there is inherent anxiety with not knowing the process or not being able to do the process fluidly. So I think that that is really important. Amanda, I know we have talked about this a lot of times, and parents will sometimes say to us, well, the manipulatives serve a purpose, but don't we get to keep the manipulatives? Here's my little bag of manipulatives that sits on my desk every day. Don't we get to keep these manipulatives all the time? And the truth of the matter is, we expect a student to step along a continuum and at some point not need them. You want to talk more about that?
Absolutely. So this is a question we get in customer service all the time. When do I use the blocks? When do we not use the blocks? Is there ever a point in the material where we, put those away and they're able to do the work independently? Or are we carrying a briefcase of blocks with us out the door to college? And the very easy answer to this question is the manipulatives are simply a tool and they are a step in the learning process. And that is where they are supposed to stay. So manipulatives are typically going to be used initially when we introduce a concept, because we're walking a student through build it so that it's visual, hands-on, and concrete. We're going to write it out in its formulaic form so that we can see what it relates to in the equation. And then we are going to talk about the process of what is actually happening in the problem and how are we arriving at our solution based on the information that we have in front of us in the problem. And so if that process is being done successfully, then there are times in a lesson practice portion of a lesson in Math UC where we are going to let them continue to build because we're learning still. We're still practicing at that point. But by the time a student gets to systematic review pages, and by the time a student is testing, they should not be using the blocks at all, because at that point, they've transferred from tool to crutch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the blocks serve a purpose, and they serve a particular purpose for us when we're doing an AIM intervention with a student. And in order to know if AIM, either one of these products, is appropriate for your student, there's some questions we want you to ask yourself. And I'm going to have Sue walk you through what she would do if she were talking to you on the phone and trying to figure out if there was benefit in doing this. So Sue, when you consult with someone about whether AIM is appropriate for them, can you talk a little bit about the kind of things you're looking for as far as questions?
Sure. I'm doing a lot of listening, because it isn't just, okay, just sell them AIM. It's rare, to be honest, if you get me on the phone, that we end the conversation at that point by name. Sometimes we do, but I want to make sure. I don't want to waste your time and your money if it is not going to be a good fit. So what I'm looking for is, I want to know, at what stage are they with their math? What is their age? What concepts have they already been through? That type of information. I want to know if they're either counting, or sometimes they're using number lines. Those are usually an indicator, or they can't get away from skip counting. They're still singing songs. Those are usually indicators that it's not that they don't know how to get to the answer. It's just that they're taking too long to get to the answer. And so we go through a conversation. I also want to check and make sure that the parent has time to spend with the student. The AIM intervention is not something where you can just hand the child and it gets fixed. You are spending the entire 15-minute session with the student. And you're also not doing a 30-minute session thinking that's going to be better, because then you'll have your student shutting down on you, and then it's counterproductive. So there's a lot we need to talk about. I want to make sure it's going to be a good fit for your situation before you purchase. And often I will send an assessment for you to give the student so you can have clarity. Sometimes you're not sure they really need AIM. And so that's where that assessment comes in handy. I have had many parents say, no, I think they're okay. I see them counting. So what I'm listening for is if you say, I see them counting once in a while. And I could send the assessment, and you're absolutely right. You don't need the AIM intervention. But I have had many parents get back to me and say, I am in total shock. I cannot believe it. Because let's be honest, you give the student the worksheet to do, they're either doing it or they're not, but you're not really noticing how much the counting's going on. And this assessment is designed, it's a verbal assessment where we're specifically watching for behaviors. And so those are the things that I do. And then from there, let's say it's a 16-year-old, I'm going to go through that assessment that you send me back very thoroughly, because I'm not going to put a 16-year-old in AIM. Sometimes there's no other choice, but we're going to try harder to see, is there another workaround? Are we seeing that they know 7 times 8 but don't know 8 times 7, and they just need to be connected with the companion facts? So sometimes it isn't straightforward, but usually if it's an 8-year-old to a 10-year-old and they're missing a lot of facts, I don't do that, because they typically at that age, they do need to go ahead and do the AIM.
So Amanda, I wonder if you could walk us through what an AIM intervention is, maybe even importantly, what it's not.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. AIM is not designed to replace alpha if your student is the correct age and in the correct developmental stage to need alpha. So AIMs were specifically designed for that student that's a little bit older. They're beyond, these lower levels where they should have foundationally learned these concepts, but for whatever reason, either some of them or all of them didn't stick. I get asked a lot by parents in alpha, do I stay in a lesson until what they're learning in that lesson is mastered, especially when it comes to the facts? And the answer is yes, you do. There are times you're going to need to park on a lesson for 2, 3, 4 weeks and really emphasize those facts to make sure that they are mastered. This is not just, hey, we did our lesson in a week. They're still counting on their fingers, but we're moving on to the next concept. Math, you see, works in a very linear, very sequential order for a very specific reason, because what we're learning in one lesson, we have to master before we introduce the next lesson. And so AIM is really designed for that child, 8, 9, 10, who should have already mastered the material in alpha, and they haven't. And so we need to remediate, and we need to look at getting those skills solid. AIM for multiplication with a bridge to division is for that 10, 11, 12, maybe even, a young teen or mid-teen. It does happen. And there's nothing to be ashamed of in that, because we have a lot going on. We are homeschool families. We are typically homeschooling more than one child at a time. I'm the poster child for that. I've got a lot going on. So it's not unforeseeable that a kid could slip through the cracks or be very crafty in how they are doing their math, to where it may be hard for you to pick up on until you're, several weeks or books down the track. And then you're going, wait a minute, we're having these struggles. We're having these simple errors, careless errors, and this is really concerning me. We need to look at what's going on and figure out what the root problem is.
And Amanda, you've said something that is really important. Sometimes as parents, we don't know what's going on, which is why there's an advantage to using assessment and having the opportunity to have a conversation with someone like Sue. So Sue, now I'm going to circle back to Laura's question, which is how long in length of time does that initial assessment take? And there's some nuances there, so I need you to explain that for her.
Right. So the important thing to understand is this is not going to be an assessment that you hand the student. This is going to be an assessment where you verbally ask them what the answer to the fact is, and then they're going to figure out how to get the answer, and you're going to observe their behavior. Now, we want the best possible information. So you may find you can only get through 6 or 7 facts, and they're starting to check out and start wiggling and not really paying attention anymore. So if you want to really get super good information, you might want to do it in spurts, like 2 or 3 minutes, come back 2 or 3 minutes later, or, wait an hour, get a few more. I've had parents too that say, you know what, I don't even need to finish this assessment. we've done 2 rows of these and they're counting on every single one. And that's fine, because the goal here is, I mean, sometimes it is nice to go through the whole assessment. So then when you come back at the end, you can say, look at where we were and look at where we are. Or if you're really not sure, finish the whole thing. It does give us a lot of good information if you do finish the whole thing, but don't make it what you need it to be. Do you just need to know whether you need to do AIM or not, or do you want to get the full picture of which facts are there and which facts are not there?
So it may take you a day to do the assessment. It may take you 2 days. What we don't want is for you to say, okay, we're going to get this assessment done. We're going to sit down. We're going to do all these facts, because even a student who knows their facts, when they are confronted with all the facts that are part of an addition and subtraction experience, can start looking really fatigued in the process.
Mhm.
So we would rather do it in 2 and 3 minute increments over time, because it gives us a more accurate assessment. Can you get it done in a day? Absolutely. Does it often take more than a day? Sometimes it does. We just want the best information possible. And Sue said something really important. Sometimes you're 10 minutes in and you're like, oh, I have an answer here. And that's okay too. Amanda, can you talk a little bit in a little bit more depth? So we've talked about these tiny increments of assessment. Why are we putting so much emphasis on a 15-minute interaction with a student in the process of AIM?
That is an incredibly important thing to bring up, because when we are working on facts, we want to make sure that we have their maximum engagement and that we are only working for a certain amount of time so that they are not fatiguing. The stress reaction is not happening, their brain is not shutting down, and we want to set them up for some success. So within a short time frame, we might be able to get a handful of facts correct and really encourage and praise them and be like, hey, look, I mean, you got more right than you got wrong. I mean, we want this process to be beneficial for them. We want it to be a relationship builder between you and your student. If they're frustrated, if you're frustrated, and that frustration is what's happening in the program, then that's not helping anybody and nobody's learning anything.
Before you give them the assessment, do not have the discussion about finger counting or anything beforehand. You want them to do what they normally would do, what their natural impulse is when you give them that fact. And you don't want them, because trust me, at this age, they still want to please you. And so then you're just adding more anxiety to the conversation, which anxiety is a whole nother piece of it. For myself, I struggle with anxiety myself, and I wouldn't know what 7 + 8 is in some situations if I'm super stressed. So you don't want them to know what you're trying to observe ahead of time, or they're going to try to put their fingers under the table or try to hide it. So just be aware of that, that you just keep encouraging them. And every time that they give you an answer, say, awesome, that's great, because it is great. When you know what they do and don't know, then you can do something about it. So just keep that in mind, that, okay, awesome, you're doing great all the way through. Do not give them like that look that we're feeling inside. It's like, are you kidding me? You don't know what 2 + 8 is? You just got to fake it. Like, keep that look off of your face so that they don't start feeling like they're disappointing you.
And I'm really glad that Sue brought anxiety into the conversation, because now what I want to talk about is not the student's anxiety, but the parent's anxiety. Because the vast majority of conversations we have with parents who need to do an AIM intervention or need to assess a child for the possibility of an AIM intervention are already coming to the table anxious, stressed out. You're feeling like you haven't delivered on a promise for your student. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, my student is so far behind. And when we start thinking the behind word, whether we want to or not, we start being really intentional to sort of crank the screws for our kids. Come on, you got to get this done. And our own anxiety about where they are can be a huge fuel to making it harder for them to move forward. So we want to make sure as parents that you understand that the intervention is going to take as long as it takes. Amanda, you talked about you got to sit here, you got to park until you get it. One of the things they have to park to do is change an ineffective habit. If you have a student who is visibly doing this or doing this, or one of our colleagues, Michael, said he had a student who took his pencil and counted like this as he worked through each problem. If that's happening, that's a habit. So Amanda, can you talk about why habit change is not going to happen like a magic wand waved and all of a sudden it's different?
Well, I mean, let's be real. Even as adults, we tell ourselves, oh, I'm going to get on a diet on Monday. I'm going to start exercising and walk 2 miles. And until you actually take those steps, until you set the alarm, until you're consistently doing it consecutive days in a row, you're not creating a good habit either. And so if you know that you struggle with time management and these types of things and getting something like that off the ground, why would our children be any different? They're going to have the very same struggles in their approach. And so this is where coming alongside them, being the adult and the instructor and being encouraging and going, buddy, I know this is hard. I know this is stretching your brain. I know we're trying to talk to them about it, talk to them about what is actually happening inside their head. You're creating neural pathways where there wasn't a path before. And so think about, especially with boys, I love to give the jungle analogy. You're like the jungle's everywhere and you have a machete and you're just chopping away. But pretty soon, everybody behind you, all of this stuff around, like you get a path and then you start walking that path consistently. And then that path gets really smooth and it gets open and you notice more things. What mastering the facts does is it frees up the brain. If you have automaticity with facts and you don't have to think about it and compute, then you have all this freed up space to learn new processes and to learn additional things on top of that. And you're not making careless errors and having simple mistakes in parts of problems that are getting more complex and more multi-step as we advance. And so that's where we normally see the breakdown occur is parents are going, wait a minute, we're at this level and this should be easy or easier, but the facts not being automatic really is an incredible deficit to a student. And if you have a kiddo with dyslexia or ADD or ADHD or any of those types of issues going on, working memory issues, it's only going to be 10 times worse for those kids, and that much more important that we really get a game plan and we really address this and get it conquered.
Now, we all also want to be realistic for you. Does that mean that every time you do an AIM intervention, you're going to have 100% of fact memory? Probably not. You may have a child who embraces the AIM process and goes from 0 to 100 in weeks. But the truth of the matter is, if you can move the ball even 25% toward more fact mastery, you've made an enormous difference in that student's life. Sue, I wonder if you could tell the story about Ashley, because I think this would be a great time for us to talk about the parent who's thinking, oh my gosh, I got a kid who's supposed to be in algebra and they're counting on their fingers. You mean I have to back up 8 years? Can we talk about what filling that gap does for a child?
Yes, but I want to add a little bit to what Amanda said, because she had a lot of good stuff there. But as you noticed, did you see Amanda went into a sales pitch? And that's what you're going to need to do for your student. This is going to be the sales pitch of your life with that child, because they're saying, why do I need to do this? The fingers are working just fine. And the interesting thing is, the hardest lesson in the AIM addition and subtraction is the +2 lesson. You're going, what? The +2 lesson? It's because it's the first lesson on fact mastery. And they don't feel like they need it. You got to make sure those fingers are on the table so that you can see them. And I've had parents say, if we can't even get through the +2 lesson in 2 weeks, how are we ever going to get out of here? But what's going on there is you're trying to help them change that habit. And it's hard. The +2 lesson is rough. But once you get past that, and they start to see the beauty of it and how they can quickly, they don't need to count anymore, then they're convinced. Now, what was your question again? Oh,
Talk
Ashley.
about Ashley's story, because I think
So I had the privilege of, my niece's daughter came home for a school year, had an IEP in math. And we started, at that time, we didn't have AIM. So what we used to have to do is make alpha work. But I mean, let's be honest, the kids are smart enough to know you're putting them in first grade. So I just really, those kids that were 16 and still did alpha, knowing it was first grade work, when we had to do that in the past, you know, because it looks like first grade work. So I just really have a great respect for those students that did that and helped us learn how to develop AIM. I really do. So we did alpha. And I remember we were through with the addition part. So I said, so I opened up beta. I says, let's do a lesson in beta. Cause she was like, please, do we have to keep doing these facts? It was just getting old. And so I opened it up and we did the lesson on column addition. And I remember it vividly. She said, whoa, show that to me again. And so I showed her and she goes, wow. She goes, I never got that at all in school. I couldn't understand it. So it's so valuable to have that fact mastery. And I just want to tell another little story. We love hearing back from the parents. Either way, if you're having trouble with AIM, call. If you're having victory with AIM, call. And she sent me an email and she said, my 11-year-old son used to cry every time we got the math books out. And today, when he was doing his math, he said, I love math. That's what we're here for. We want that to happen for everyone that has a student struggling, especially due to fact mastery.
So Amanda, that leads me to another question that I want to ask, and because parents have asked it, do I have to be a Math UC family to use AIM?
So that is one of the beautiful things and one of the reasons that we developed this particular product, because we were seeing this as an issue across the board, whether they were Math UC students or not. We were getting calls about, what can we do? How do we remediate? And so that's really why we developed AIM. So everything you need to be successful with AIM is included in that kit, whether you are a Math UC family who has our manipulatives or not. Everything you need is in that kit and will set you up to be successful in AIM.
So we're at the bottom of the hour, and it always amazes me how fast time passes when we're having this conversation. I want to turn our attention to some of the questions that parents ask us when they registered. We had a parent who said, I have AIM, I just haven't gotten around to starting AIM. And Sue, I know you have this conversation on the reg. How do you encourage a parent to go ahead, open the box, and figure out the process?
Yeah, so I am not someone that likes to read a lot of instructions. So if you're like me, you're going to open this and go, oh my gosh, where do I start with this? So some good places to start are go in, log into your digital pack, watch some of the startup videos. Maybe you watch it by yourself first time, and then kind of take note of, oh, this will be good to bring in the student later when we get started, that type of thing. The most important pages are, what is it, 15?
I think it's 14 and 15.
14 and 15. If you can't handle all that other writing, at least look at those. That's going to give you the skeleton of what you're going to do. In fact, what I recommend is to refer back to that, have a paperclip or something on that so that you can get back to that. Because even as you get started, you go, now, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, how long am I supposed to be doing one session? You start having doubts, and then you start worrying. It's like, are we ever going to get through all this? Because it does take time. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be a good fix. And where you're going to catch up with your time is down the road, because so often when you get done with this and we reassess to place them, they are placing really close to the level that you were hoping they would be. But the thing is, the support is there. Make sure you get real familiar with that digital access and all the things there. Make sure you look for the activities. That's another piece that people miss, is they revert back because we have these little, they look like flashcards, but they are not flashcards. Just forget it. They are not flashcards. They're used for a different purpose. And then, especially if someone calls and says they're struggling, I'll say, so what are you doing? What activities are you doing for reviews? He goes, oh, well, we're just flashcarding. So the problem is flashcards do not help them memorize. Think about it. You know, we've all studied for that test on Friday and we forget it by Monday. And that information typically will go into short-term memory. So as soon as you quit the flashcards, the facts are forgotten again. So make sure you take use of those activities. And as soon as you finish that +2 lesson, make sure that review is part of your time as well. So some of those things may not be clear because there's too much writing in here for people like us that don't want to read all of that. So those are the key pieces. And then also make sure to call us if you're just like, don't give up. Don't give us a call. We are here for you. We aren't here just to sell you the product. We're here to walk you through it. We're here because you're supposed to be all cheery and wonderful in these lessons. So you want to be real encouraging. You might just need to vent. I mean, I've told my moms, I said, if you need to have a meltdown, do not do it in front of the student. Go on a walk, give me a call. I mean, we're here for you. So that's probably beyond what you were saying, but it just reminded me of getting started. It can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. So it's like eating an elephant, and you're going to do it with one spoon and one spoon at a time. The aim for success videos that you'll find in your digital toolbox will move the ball an enormous distance for you. So we'd encourage you to watch those aim for success videos. And Amanda, I want to come back to another question about currently struggling in AIM and trying to reframe that mindset of we're behind in math. So I want you to think about that for a second. And I want to answer Glenda's question. She says, does this address a child with dyslexia that appears to have dyscalculia? An 11-year-old not able to add more than 1 + 1. And I will tell you that I have consulted with families of children who learn differently here at Demme Learning for the last 8.5 years. And dyscalculia is a very difficult diagnosis to make accurately. I have met families who have children who have had that. And the AIM intervention is, to a degree, successful. But what I really want to talk about here is, if you have that suspicion, if you have a child who just doesn't seem to be able to even recognize 1 + 1, you may have something else going on, and it doesn't involve math fact retention. It may have to do with the fact that they have what's called an eye teaming issue. In other words, their eyes aren't tracking together across a page the way they're supposed to. So Amanda, I'm going to circle back to that currently struggling question. And what I want you to do is to talk a little bit more about what a parent should be looking for if a child is really struggling with what appears to be dyslexia and dyscalculia, and what they should be looking for to rule out before they make those suppositions.
Absolutely. So I have two students that have visual processing issues. Dyslexia is kind of, I think of it like an umbrella, and there's a lot of different little things that can be underneath the umbrella causing the issue that is dyslexia. And so we kind of have to figure out and rule some things out to kind of really get our finger on the pulse of what's really going on. So 50% of dyslexics are ADD or ADHD on top of the dyslexia. So we have attention issues, we have vision issues, and we may have a actual math form of dyslexia, and we may, have a writing form of dyslexia. So there's a lot going on. There can be a lot impacting your student. But what I predominantly see when I talk to families that are expressing a concern that this is a real issue for them is 9 times out of 10, they have some sort of visual confusion going on. So there's something in the way that their eyes are perceiving or processing the information on the page. Some kids are very successful with colored overlays that tones down the visual confusion. Some kids need vision therapy so that their eyes are tracking and working and converging in the same ways, which can be very frustrating because my husband was actually, given eye exams all through his formative school years and had perfect 20/20 vision. That just says your eyes are seeing at a good strength. It doesn't rule out what's actually happening when we're trying to read or we're trying to compute math and we're trying to keep columns straight and we're trying to carry and make sure things are in the right places. Dyslexia can very much be a disorganization issue because of what's happening visually. And so it can be very challenging for that student to keep things in the right place and in the right order, or even remember all of the steps in a multi-step process. A lot of times when I have this conversation with a parent, I say, can you tell this child to get their shoes on, find their coat, and meet you at the front door? And they go, have you been to my house? How do you know this child? And I'm like, because I live with them. I get it. They forget. And so working memory is a huge foundational piece a lot of times for a student that's specifically struggling with fact retention. I had a brother that had significant working memory issues. And he went through a program that when he started, he was in the 0th percentile, but when he completed the program, he was in the 45th percentile. While some parents would be like, well, that's still not average. That's still not, up there. I cannot tell you the difference that jump made in his ability to do academics and to retain what he was learning. And so again, you talked about fact mastery and, if we don't get 100%, have we failed? No, we haven't, because even if 45, 65, 95% of them are mastered, that's way better than 0.
Absolutely. And I think one of the important things to take away from this is that we're not diagnosticians. We just have a lot of conversation with families. And often when we have those conversations, parents suspect when a child can't retain a fact that there is an issue of dyscalculia. Sometimes that's been diagnosed for those children. And if you don't rule out vision as a mitigating factor, you don't really have the whole picture. Interestingly enough, vision is so critical in our being able to slot information correctly into our brains. That's often why we see kids, but 10, 11, 12 years old, and mom is exasperated and the kid is defeated because nothing has worked and they haven't been able to commit a single fact to memory. So part of the reason for the development of AIM was to create a continuum to step a student along. Does that mean that you can use AIM and it'll solve all your challenges? No. You may need to do further conversation and further research, but I would encourage you to look for some things. And here's some things that you can look for to see if what we're saying lines up. Do you have a student who has very messy handwriting? Does their handwriting slope up or down? Is it all over the place? Is it handwriting that looks like only a pharmacist could read? Do they, like Amanda said, have the inability, even at the age of 11 or 12, to process 3-step directions? Do they forget where they are while they're doing something? That's also a definition of menopause, but that's not what we're talking about today. So if they forget what they're doing as they're doing it, sometimes it's because the visual information that's coming in isn't going in the right place the way it's supposed to. So we would encourage you to explore that in a little bit more depth. What do you need to do that? You need to find someone who is a developmental optometrist, not an ophthalmologist, but an optometrist, because they are skilled in examining the musculature of the eyes and seeing whether it works together. Amanda, I haven't forgotten the fact about currently being behind. I am going to circle back to that. But Sue, I want to ask you about inspiring kids and helping them with high school math. And I know that you often have this conversation. Sometimes it's not addition and subtraction. So if we have a child who's struggling in algebra, what are the other things that we are looking for to see that might be something they're not proficient with? And that's why algebra is a struggle.
Yes. So if someone calls and says, my student is struggling in Algebra 1, there's a lot of things it could be. So the first thing I want to do is send them an Algebra 1 readiness test and make sure that they take their time, they take breaks as needed, tell them to show their work, because if I just see right and wrong answers, I know nothing. Tell them that I will give them credit for knowledge. If they get the answer wrong, I will go back through, okay, they got the answer wrong, but does it appear they know what they're doing? The number one piece that shows up is fractions. And often I will say, so what happens is the fraction formula is very simple, and it usually involves, mostly single digit work. But do they often ask you, remind me how to add fractions? So they say, yeah, they say that all the time. I say, yes. So they know that to add fractions, you ask the teacher the formula. So that often tells us that they do not understand fractions. They survive fraction problems. In Algebra 1, you're not cutting pizzas up anymore. You need to understand inside and out how those fractions will work to solve the equation in the most effective way, or to simplify the problem before you process it. So it is not unusual at all that the student has to go back and do a review of epsilon. That's very, very, very common. Decimals and percents, usually not as much. Usually I have a little method where they can just do some practice on it. They basically don't know how to do it, but they need a practice session while they're doing the fractions. And usually then they're good to go. But that's very common. And the way we teach fractions, to me, the way we teach fractions is one of the best level. If you do nothing else with Matthew C., our epsilon is phenomenal, because we teach them to understand, and we teach them with manipulatives so that they will remember. And so I'm not that good at remembering how to do fractions either until I learned Matthew C. And now I just have those little manipulatives and that little method in my head, and I can get back to it and figure it out. It also connects fractions to, it's just another form of division. which that could be really helpful to understand that when you're, and it's also another form of decimals. So it connects all the pieces so that it makes sense when you're go to algebra 1 and things are more complex and you have choices. You can go this way or that way, but what's the easiest way to get there? The other piece that I want to add in here too, that has to do with basically all of the levels, is that especially if you're in math, you see when you're in those practice pages, you are learning. You're not supposed to know everything just because you watch the video for 5 minutes. And my favorite phone call was this young man who was in algebra 1, and he called and he says, I don't get it. This is just all messed up. And I said, so how many days have you been working on this? And he said, just today. And I said, you do know that you're not supposed to know everything the first day? He goes, what? I mean, he was shocked. The mom was shocked. It's a they're practice pages. I said, those practice pages is where you do the learning. I said, I don't even care if you don't get the whole page done. Let's say you do the first section and you just don't get it and you're 20 minutes in, you need to walk away. It's not about finishing a sheet, because also if you finish those sheets, whether it's algebra or another level, and you did it all wrong, you just taught your brain to do it incorrectly. So make sure, regardless if it's algebra or what, that the kids know, and I'm sorry, I can't seem to get my phone to quit ringing. Make sure they know that, especially when they're in the practice pages, they may not get it. That is normal behavior. That does not mean they're not good at math because they immediately don't get it. And some kids that were really strong in math in the lower grades are really shocked when they get to algebra 1 because they aren't getting it right away and they used to. So that learning to persevere, and which AIM is perfect for that, because you're going to be learning to persevere. It's not going to be the quick fix, but once they get rolling on it, and once they catch the vision, and once they get those blocks in their head, and they no longer have to look outside of their head to see the answer, that's when it's going to start coming together. But learning to learn will be one of the biggest things that you'll learn in AIM. Learning that it takes time, it takes process for the light bulb to go on.
Absolutely. I really love that. Learning to learn, I think, is something that we could all take away from that, whether you're going to use AIM as an intervention or not. Amanda, I want to circle back to this question, and then I have a really good question here about, can you use AIM in schools? So we're going to, with a student who is in a school. Sorry, I'm truncating my own sentences here. But I want to circle back to having you answer, how do you get past the feeling of we're behind in math? So the question is, currently in AIM and struggling to see how we aren't behind in math, 5th grade, in the AIM Edition program and just about to finish. What's the words of encouragement here? Because I know you have this conversation all the time.
Yes, we do. So first of all, I feel like I have a little bit of an unfair advantage on this particular question because I'm coming at it from being a second generation homeschooler. So I am already so outside the box that this always kind of baffles me when parents are worried about being behind, because I'm like, well, what are you more concerned with? What is your goal here? Is it just that we can put a check mark or a gold star that we did it? Or do you actually really want them to know and understand and master and be able to have an intelligent conversation and explain how and why they know what they know? So if that's the goal, then the process is going to look different and the timeline may look different depending on the kid. Every kid learns at a different rate. Kids have different processors. I mean, we all know that we have a kid in our family that if we ask them what their name is, they're just going to blurt out their name. And then we also have the child who they're going to look at you, look down at the ground, dig their toe in the dirt for a second, and then they're going to look back at you and tell you their name. Those are processing speeds. everybody has a different processing speed. And so you have to make allowances for that. And that can happen in the educational journey too. Some kids are going to grasp and pick up concepts quickly, sometimes quickly enough that it's frankly scary to try to keep up with them as an instructor. And some kids, you're going to be going the tortoise and the hare. Like, you're like, are you with me? Like, are we even learning anything? What is happening here? Some parents describe a Groundhog Day experience. We had it yesterday. We woke up this morning and they're looking at me like I've never seen this before in my life. All of those things can be very normal to your learning process. Now, does that mean it's easy? Does that mean it's not frustrating? No. But again, this is an opportunity as the instructor to be an incredible observer of your student and to do whatever it takes for them to be successful. And you have to determine as the parent what you gauge success as being. And my encouragement to you would be, mastery is really the goal. Equipping kids with tools to find out the answers and to get the information and be able to reiterate that to you or to get it out in a good written form, reading good books, being able to do your math well and show your work and explain why and how you know what you know. That is really what's important here.
And I think that that is really an important takeaway. If we can frame it accurately for our students, what we have said to you today is you'll be surprised at the things that fall into place behind what you're taking the time to correct, because it doesn't mean that you're going to step through multiple grade levels in order to catch up. I think you will be delightfully surprised to see how many things come together for your student once they have this foundational skill set. Laura's asked a terrific question. She said she has a 12-year-old in public school who is using number lines and multiplication charts because he doesn't have facts mastered. And the truth is there are memory issues here. So could that have something to do with it? But here's the challenge. When you are using those kinds of tools, whether it's a number line, whether it's a calculator, whether it's a multiplication chart, no matter what it is, that means you've got to take the math problem in front of you and you got to come over here to something else and do something to have an answer and come back to the math problem you're working on. Every time you do that, it increases the probability of error. So it becomes inordinately frustrating. Face it, public schools are given a mandate to move along a continuum. You've got a whole group of kids, and we've got some kids who are swimming at the front of the pack and some kids who are dragging up the rear, but they've got to be in a certain place by a certain time. And so kids who are struggling get lost in the swimming of that whole pack. One of the things that I think is really important to understand is, can you use AIM as an intervention beside a public school intention? And the answer to that is absolutely. And you'd be amazed at what kind of a game changer it is. But where you have to be very intentional is to read your student. And Sue has talked about this. Sometimes kids are going to shut down at the 10th minute. And you're thinking, well, I bought this intervention and it says 15 minutes. So I really want to be intentional about 15 minutes. You've got to be able to read your student. They've already put in a whole day at school and now they're sitting at the kitchen table with you. Maybe you're only going to get 10 minutes out of them. Right. It says that it takes 14 to 16 weeks to accomplish that process. It might take you 24 weeks to accomplish that process because you may need to eat this elephant with a smaller spoon. But if, as Amanda said earlier, if you can even move the ball 20 to 25%, it makes such a difference for your students that you can't even quantify it. Ladies, we're at the top of the hour. Man, this one went fast. I'm going to ask you to give our parents your closing thoughts. Sue, I'll start with you.
I just want to say, first of all, this program didn't happen just with us. It was working with parents, listening to you. We learned so much from you. So never feel like you're bothering us as we help you process your situation, you're helping other people as well, because we learn so much from you. Just know that while we can't guarantee 100% of the facts, we have seen this be a game changer over and over and over. And we're glad to talk to you, myself, anybody on the placement team. We are glad to help you not only decide whether to use AIM, but I always like to give you the long-term view. If this happens, if we get AIM squared away, from what you're telling me, this is what's going to be next. And this is where you're looking like you're on course to be at graduation. I will even give you that whole big 10,000 foot view to put your mind at ease, because that's just as important. There's no judgment here. We're just here to help.
Absolutely. Amanda?
So from a customer service standpoint, one of the things that we hear the most from our customers is how appreciative they are that they get a real person. When you call us, when you live chat with us, when you email us, a real person who has a homeschooling background, is currently in the trenches, or has graduated kiddos out of homeschooling, is going to be there to support you. I have parents call and ask for support in levels like alpha and beta and gamma and delta. And we have parents that call in and seek support for kiddos in algebra 1, algebra 2, pre-cal and calculus. We are available for you Monday through Friday. We are happy to hear from you, no matter what it is. I mean, and some of our favorite calls are when you call in to tell us how much you love the program and how well it has worked for your kids, and what a turnaround you have seen, because really that is our ultimate goal. We want to see families excited about and being successful with math, and that is our ultimate goal.
Absolutely. And so does that mean if you have the product and you're struggling, we don't want to hear from you? Not at all. In fact, we want to hear from those families even more, because sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation and 2 tweaks, and that changes the course of your student's ship. And we want to be able to do that for you. We thank you all for joining us today. It has been my very great pleasure to host these ladies. I'm telling you, they know so much about how to make your journey successful. Please feel free to reach out to us. They are indicative of everyone who works on the front line here at Demme Learning, because everyone here has a vested interest in your success, and we'd really like to see that happen. We're looking forward to hosting you again soon. If you're looking for past webinars, you can certainly find that information on our blog. You can go to demmelearning.com/blog, and you can find all the webinars there that we have done this year. I want to make reference to one as we conclude today. Amanda mentioned kids who often have dyslexia, have comorbidities of ADHD. I'm here to tell you, I think in this society, in this day and age with these things, we all have ADD. So I want to encourage you, if you're the parent of a boy, there are 2 webinars in our webinar series about teaching boys and how you have to relate to them different. I'm the parent of 3 boys, and I learned things in both of those webinars this year. So as a homework assignment, let me encourage you that that might be a place for you to go and follow up and find some really good information. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody.